welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to give an update on some orchids that I got 3 years ago. So I haven't made this kind of video in a while, but you guys tend to really like these before and after over the span of a couple of years. And I got a comment on one of my old videos last night, basically saying, wow, I didn't realize this video was 3 years ago. Can you give an update? And I had no ideas on what videos to make, so I saw that and I was like, this is perfect. So I'm going to give you an update on the 7 orchids that I got from Sunset Valley Orchids in March of 2021, so 3 springs ago. I got so many orchids then. I don't have all of them anymore, but I have most of them. Most of them have bloomed, so I'm going to give you an update on how they did when I first got them. I'll show you a before and after so you can get an idea of how they grow, how they bloom, what to expect, etc. And with that said, we will jump right in. Okay, so the first orchid that I got from Sunset Valley Orchids that I unboxed was the BLC Sunspots crossed with the BC Richard Mueller. Now this orchid is right here. It turned out to be one of my favorite orchids of all time. So it was one of my first Richard Mueller hybrids that I just really liked. I saw that it was so vigorous. I saw that it was growing so easily. And this is now registered as the BLC Paula Spots. It was the first orchid to bloom for me. It was a little seedling and it bloomed off every single growth. So I've probably bloomed this orchid in those 3 years, maybe 10 times. So this is one of my all-time favorite orchids. You guys know I love Richard Mueller hybrids, and this is part of the reason why every single growth just blooms and the bloom count continues to improve. So I think last time I had two canes blooming at the same time. One had 4 flowers, the other one had 3. It was beautiful. It lasts for about a month. It's fragrant. And I repotted this orchid maybe 2-3 months ago, and it already has roots coming out of the bottom. So that gives you an idea of how vigorous this orchid is. I was very happy with this one. I divided it when I repotted it a couple of months ago. So the plant was just growing in, I had it in a little Deli container in semi-hydro, and it was just growing so tightly. And the root ball was very, very tight, compact. And I ended up splitting this into 3. So I sent it down to a couple of my friends in Florida, and they have 2 pieces of it. I kept this. It's been a little slow to bloom now that it's been divided, which is expected, but with the roots coming out like this, it's gonna bloom really, really soon. So I have a little sheath coming in. I wanna say, yes, I have a little sheath coming in on the newest growth. We got some room here in the pot, but this will probably be okay for about a year and a half. This is a 5.5 or 6 inch pot, but this orchid did wonderfully. It's now registered as the Paula Spots. If you find it, highly recommend it. And this orchid was a cause of why I really started liking Richard Mueller hybrids. Bloom from here, bloom from here, bloom from there. It just blooms off every single growth. I probably get blooms at least 4 times a year, if not more. Love this orchid. The next orchid that I unboxed is the Cattleya Hamana Egret, and it was a little seedling, and when I repotted it, I found that it was 2 plants, so I gave a plant to another YouTuber, and then I kept the other plant, and it's been growing really well. It's very vigorous, but with that said, if I keep it in this pot, I think it's gonna struggle. So I have to repot it. I'm gonna do it when I get back from my trip. As you're watching this, I'm in Brazil right now. So when I get back, I think I'm gonna spend the month of May just hitting the collection pretty hard, just making sure that I repot these, because I'm finding that a lot of times, even vigorous orchids, a lot of the roots here inside have died off, and then the only roots that are alive are the ones outside of the pot. I'm gonna give you an update on one that didn't make it shortly, but this is growing very vigorously. It's bloomed maybe about 3 or 4 times. For me, it's vigorous, but not as vigorous as the Paula Spots. This is a cross between the Cattleya Walkeriana with the Cattleya dubiosa scully. The blooms smell like a spicy rose. I showed this orchid in my top 10 fragrant orchids, I believe, that video. The fragrance is very strong. It's very nice. It's not just a rose, it's like a cinnamon rose. It's so, so nice. It does look a lot like the Walkeriana, but it is more vigorous than the Walkeriana. And I was very happy with it, but I really know I need to repot it. Just looking at how crowded it is, and this system is not optimal. It's been in here for 2 years, so when I get back, I'm gonna take care of this, and hopefully we have a new growth in here that I hope it doesn't grow down. Let me see if I can show you. Can you see it? It's right here. Yeah, it's pointing down right there. I just hope it doesn't grow down while I'm away. But when I get back, this is probably going to be a priority because I don't want to lose this plant, but I'm very happy with it. It's grown well, it's vigorous. If you want something that's similar to the Walkeriana, but more vigorous, this one is the Cattleya Hamana Egret. Okay. The next orchid that I unbox is the Cattleya Maikai by the Cattleya Caudebec Linwood. And I found that orchid to be extremely, extremely vigorous. It took about a year for that orchid to bloom in my care. And it bloomed twice. So I found that the blooms look different from when it bloomed in cooler temperatures and when it bloomed in the summer. So in cooler temperatures, it was like a darker color with spots. And then in the summer, when it was hot, it bloomed bright pink. So that was really interesting. I ended up giving that orchid away to a friend in Florida. And I was gonna divide it, but the root system was so vigorous in Leca, similar to this, that it was just like, so packed down, I couldn't divide it. It would have taken me a long time and I would have had to hack away at the roots. So I was gonna keep a piece and give away a piece, and I was like, no, this is going in one piece. So I found it very vigorous. I found it very beautiful. I enjoyed it. It had nice fragrance. I remember that. I love the difference of the color in cooler temps and warmer temps. I preferred the way it looked when it was like cooler. But that was a very vigorous one. I think anything with like a Maikai in it tends to be quite vigorous. That has Brassavola nodosa. We know that those orchids are super, super vigorous, super easy to grow. It was pretty compact. It wasn't huge. It had a tight growth pattern. But that was a good one. If I was able to divide it, if it weren't so vigorous, I would probably still have a piece, but because it was so like, I wanted to share it with a friend and I was like, nah, you could have it. It's gonna grow like a weed, that sort of thing. And yeah, it was a good one, and I'm happy that it's in a good home in Florida, and I have way too many orchids, so I'm always happy to share and part with things that I've bloomed that I enjoyed the blooms. And I get so many orchids from some of my friends. I always like to give them something nice back. So yeah, that one is surely growing nicely down in Florida, mounted on a tree somewhere, in a pot somewhere. I don't know, but I could imagine it's double the size from when I had it. Okay, so the next orchid that I unboxed is the Brassavola David Sander, and that's a cross between the Brassavola cucullata and the Rhyncholalia digbyana. So this is what it looks like now. So I had it in a semi-hydro setup for about 2 years, and I repotted it about a month ago. Now repotting it set it back a little bit, and I've lost some of the canes, which is kind of normal, but it looks okay. We have some new growths coming in at the bottom, so I'm not too worried about it. It had a little bit of transplant shock, but what can you do? It's kind of normal. But we do have new roots pushing in, and we do have new growths coming in at the bottom. This one tends to grow down, and I don't like that because it takes up space, so I have it with some garden tape here, just trying to hold it up. It's never bloomed for me in these 3 years. One of my friends also got this one, and it hasn't bloomed for him either. So this one is taking a really long time. 3 years, no blooms. Hopefully this year I get blooms. It's supposed to be really nice with that digbyana parent. but I put in a nice special pot. Like I love this cute little clay pot. And yeah, we have it in here. I keep stabbing myself with the with the growths, but I have it in here in moss and bark, maybe about 30% moss and the rest bark. And we'll see how it goes. I'll keep you updated, but I'm a little sad that it's been 3 years and this one hasn't bloomed yet. Okay, the next orchid that I got two of them. I got one for me and I got one for my mom, and it was the SL Minipet. So it was a mini Cattleya, and I struggled with that orchid so much. There was a big one and a little one. I gave my mom the big one, not the big one, but the one with more growths, and mine had just a couple of growths, and mine never grew. It never pushed out a new growth. It never, I don't know what was up with it. I think it had a virus, but it never grew. About a year ago, I just got rid of it because it was just sitting there, not doing anything. I think it was virus. All of my orchids grow, especially Cattleya orchids. When there's nothing wrong with it, they grow. If there's something wrong with it, maybe I had fusarium, I don't know, but it never grew for me. It never bloomed. It never progressed beyond how you guys see it in the unboxing video. So it was unfortunate, but sometimes you get weak orchids. Sometimes you'll get virused orchids. It's not your fault if you're taking care of it well. Obviously, these other orchids that I have, they've grown well, but sometimes the vigor on some plants is just not there. So I got rid of it. My mom's went on to bloom and do well. So hers did well. I don't have any pictures of hers, but I know that hers is doing just fine. And yeah, it was a bummer because I wanted a little mini pet, but what can you do? The next orchid, this one is kind of sad. So the next orchid that I got is the Cattleya Walkeriana, and I'm kind of sad about talking about this one, but it was so beautiful. I bloomed it. I bloomed it about 1.5 years after receiving it. It was a beautiful flat flower with a rose fragrance. Unlike the Cattleya Hamana Egret, this one was like pure strong rose. I bloomed it twice, and I had it in a semi-hydro setup like this. And unfortunately, after it bloomed the second time, it declined and just every cane started dying off. And I should have repotted it when I saw signs that it was declining. But I think after the second time that it bloomed, it just exhausted itself. So unfortunately, I lost that orchid. I was very sad about it because it was my favorite of all of these. Aside from the Paula Spots, that Walkeriana flower is just so gorgeous. And it was probably the reason for me that solidified moving away from semi-hydro. I just realized that it was rotting some of the roots on some of my orchids. Not hybrids, like just to compare that Maikai Leah that by Caudebec Linwood, that one was insanely vigorous. It had roots that grew even in the water that were completely alive. That's a hybrid, a vigorous hybrid. Walkeriana is a species. It has more particular care. So semi-hydro works for some orchids in my collection, and it works really well. But for species, it may not work. I still do have some species in semi-hydro that I'm gonna move out of it that are still in it, like my Rhyncholilia glauca is in it. So I'm gonna take that out of semi-hydro when I get back from my trip, but I just wanted to share that. It was, when I saw it decline, I was like, oh, maybe I should just go back to organic. So it was a bummer. It was beautiful when it bloomed, but I lost that orchid. Okay, the last orchid that I unboxed was the LC Mini Blue Star. And that was a very pretty, very vigorous orchid. It grew very well. I got one for me and I got one for my mom. However, every time that orchid bloomed, the flower was very deformed. And I was like, all right, let me give it another shot. It took about 1.5 years to get it to bloom for the first time. And then I was like, okay, the bloom is not pretty, but let's try again. Because sometimes your first bloom is not so nice. And then I let it bloom again. And then the bloom was deformed again. It had really nice fragrance on it. It was really pretty. It smelled amazing, but the bloom was just like meh. I let it bloom a third time. It was deformed again. I let it bloom a fourth time. It was deformed again. And then I just decided, I don't think this orchid is gonna fix itself. Every time it blooms, the flower kind of like, the petal and the lips were fused together and just never sorted itself out. Now my mom's, she grew hers, and the first 2 times it was deformed, and then the third time she got really nice blooms off of it. So hers was able to sort itself out, but there tends to be an issue with some Cerulean orchids. Cerulean are the blue and purple orchids. There tends to be more issues with deformities on those, and they tend to sort themselves over time. But given that I had the orchid about 3 years, actually when I repotted this, I was going to repot that one, and I just made a decision to get rid of it because I've had it for 3 years. It's still deformed, and I don't know, I just felt like it wasn't worth keeping it if it was opening up such a deformed flower. So let me know down in the comments if you've ever experienced this with Cerulean orchids in particular, and if you've ever had cases where they haven't sorted themselves out. And I thought 3 years was enough time. I have so much, I'm pointing to my grow room. So here's my kitchen, my grow room is in a room right there. I have so little space left in my grow space because my orchids are getting so much bigger, because I have to repot them into bigger pots over time, that when something is not vigorous, like the SL Minipet, that could have a virus that could spread to other orchids. Or when the LC Mini Blue Star is deformed, I just make a decision, all right, I gotta get rid of you. Just because it's just not doing anything to my collection and it's just frustrating me. So I'm sure some of you can relate, but let me know your thoughts on Cerulean orchids. Overall, I'm very happy with this haul. I got so many orchids that year, and I haven't made an update like this in a while. If you guys are interested in more updates like this, let me know down below. I want to thank the viewer who asked me to do an update on this, because I literally woke up this morning and I was like, what video am I gonna make? And then I saw that comment and I was like, all right, we can do that. So when you're watching this video, hopefully I'm at a beach somewhere in Brazil. But I will be back next week, and I'll make new content for you guys. And yeah, I hope everyone's doing well, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.